Hello, and welcome to the Chez Hanny podcast, featuring women who have made creative career change. And today's episode is episode 13 in this series, and I'm quite sorry to say that it's actually the final episode of this inspiring creative career change series of podcasts. And I am in the process of making a new series of podcasts, which is going to feature women who consider themselves to be multi hyphenates in the way that they approach their work. And I'm really excited to be sharing that with you, and it will be coming fairly soon over the next month or so. So do watch out for it. But today's episode, this final one in the series, I'm delighted to introduce the brilliant Sarah Robertson, who I've connected with on Substack for several months. And I've been really inspired by so much of what she writes about, the way she writes, and her insight into how she set up her own business. And I'm delighted to be able to share this interview with you today. So I really, really hope that you enjoy it. Sarah, welcome to the Chez Hanny podcast. I'm delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you. Could you begin by introducing yourself?
Hi, Hannah. Thanks so much for having me. So my name's Sarah Robertson, and I am a branding designer and creative mentor. I run a design studio called These Are the Days, and I also write on Substack. I have a publication called Brand Seasons, and that's a space for me to explore creativity and curiosity and connection. Three of my values, but also topics that I really enjoy writing about.
Thank you so much. Can we start by you talking to us about your first job after finishing school?
Sure, yes. So my first job, I was quite lucky in a lot of ways because I left school midway through the final year. There had been some challenges with changes in the exam system. So they brought um, new kinds of qualifications into the Scottish exam system. And I suppose we were like the guinea pigs for that. So when I was studying for my hires, as they're called in Scotland, I was focusing on art and design, English and music. And many of us, in fact, almost all of us, received lower grades than anticipated. And so in my sixth and final year of school, I was essentially repeating a lot of subjects,
Right.
and, found that to be a real challenge. So decided to leave school, and I did have a little bit of time, I think it was probably a couple of months where I was kind of not sure what was next for me because my big dream had always been to go to art college, um, and one of my little brothers handed me the yellow pages one day and said, "You can't keep moping around. You're gonna have to make some calls. Um, maybe just, see about getting something temporary job-wise." So, yeah, I made a few calls and, I got an interview for a customer services job at a financial services company. But while I was in the interview, they mentioned that there was a job in their marketing department, and I think because there was quite a big kind of creative element to my CV with the subject I was studying, particularly around kind of the art and the writing, and I'd also studied graphic communication as well. Um, they gave me the opportunity to go for that marketing job. So I was invited back for a second interview, and it was for a trainee um, in the marketing department doing web authoring at the time. So writing for the website, but also learning a bit of code. And yeah, it felt like, a good creative opportunity. And I was really fortunate to get that job. So yeah, at 17, I started out in a small kind of subdivision called e-business within the marketing team, and yeah, really just things grew and established from there.
And how talk to us about how it did establish after that and where you kind of went when you were working for that company and perhaps slightly beyond that.
Yeah, so within the job I was doing, I was learning more about the web, and I was doing on the job training, so essentially learning about web development, but also supporting the organization with like e-business marketing. So helping their customers use their online services essentially. So at a very early age, I suppose I had that kind of exposure to branding and business. And yeah, I obviously had an interest in art, and it just felt like an opportunity for me to bring some of those interests and skills together. And I was there for maybe a year or two in that department, and then an opportunity to join another department came up, and that was to train on the job as a graphic designer. So I switched from the kind of web skills over to the kind of graphic skills, and again just built up my knowledge in that area. So it was a good opportunity for me really to build a well-rounded skill set in graphics and digital design. And yeah, I think I was there for about 2.5 years in that department. So yeah.
Okay. And what was it that made you take the leap into eventually starting your own creative business?
So I'd spent almost 5 years in that organization, working in various roles, and I couldn't really see further opportunities for promotion, unless I
Okay.
turned my focus away from design, because I was getting to the point where they wanted me to do financial exams, and things were kind of coming in that were almost like, I suppose they wanted all staff to have a particular knowledge base in finance, but that just wasn't an interest for me at all. I loved the marketing side, I loved the graphic design side, I loved the website design, but I didn't want to do financial services exams, no way. And
Yeah.
I did one, and the challenge of it, I failed it the first time. The second time I managed to pass it, um, mainly because I studied it in a different way, or a way that kind of felt a little bit more supportive for me. But yeah, I didn't want to put myself through that again and again, and it just felt like it was taking me away from what I really enjoyed. So I started to do a bit of design on the side, in the evenings and at
Okay.
weekends, and really started to kind of like try and carve out a path for myself that was away from the financial services industry. Because, I'd hit a creative ceiling of sorts, in that environment.
That makes complete sense. And how did you start to then make that plan of launching your own business a reality? So you were doing things in the evenings and at weekends. How did that kind of build up to the point where you actually handed your notice in on your job and made that leap?
Yeah, well, there were a couple of things I was doing really. I mean, on the one hand, I was trying to get some work within a design agency. So actually,
Okay.
rather than being, a designer within a larger company, I thought I want to move to an actual design agency and get some experience there. So I'd started looking for that kind of work, but it was impossible really, because they were often looking for agency experience or a degree in a creative subject. And of course, I'd chosen not to go to university. And I suppose I could have gone back and taken that route, but I was lucky in the sense that my employer was happy to train me on the job in those skills. So I suppose by the time I got to 21, which is when, some of my kind of friends and family were maybe leaving university about that age, they were then going into the workplace. I'd already had about 4.5, 5 years experience in the workplace. And so for me, it was really about trying to kind of like leap into a different area. But unfortunately, yeah, I really struggled to get into an agency. And so that's when I thought, I'll just start my own gig. I'll run my own creative studio and see how that goes. So I got some support from the Business Gateway, who I approached with
Okay.
a business plan. So at the time, they were offering grants of around £1,000. So that was enabling me to buy like a license, for example, for my design software. I also went to Prince's Trust and got a low interest loan for £5,000. Um, So I used that to buy computer equipment, marketing material that I needed, desk, these sorts of things. So I set up in the corner of my living room in the flat that I was renting and, carried on doing bits and pieces for family and friends in the evenings and at weekends until I plucked up the courage to hand my notice in. So it was very much a kind of like a side gig until such time as I felt, I've got the confidence to leap. And that confidence, interestingly, came in a call from a design studio who'd said, we got your CV a while ago and we're looking for someone to come in and I was doing something like called typesetting, which is essentially I was asked to come in and do quite detailed brochures for them in
Yeah.
different languages. And
Okay.
the reason they approached me is because my work in financial services included designing and typesetting British brochures, but I also worked on their German brochures as well and supported them with marketing in other countries. So that actually landed me the agency work, and they said, "We'd like you to come in 2 days a week." And so I just felt I had that, that kind of, I suppose that support, and springboard to then be able to do my own thing. Because I thought, "Right, I've got 2 days a week of freelance work, and then the other days I will have to fill with client work." So yeah, that's when I handed my notice in, and, um I think that was in the November of 2005, and then, yeah, it was pretty much, on my own from the January, so
Yeah.
yeah.
There's two things that struck me in what you've just said. One is that I think sometimes it's easy for people to overlook the fact that there are sometimes grants and kind of support loans and things out there for people launching businesses. It's a case often, isn't it, of searching for it and hunting them down. But certainly in the UK, I think those things are available if you put the right plans and things together. So it's a really good reminder to maybe other people out there as well that when launching something, it can seem really daunting, and it is daunting, but there are maybe little pockets of money or support out there that can maybe just help boost the confidence. And I guess even getting
Yeah.
some of those grants helped build your confidence a little bit that somebody else was
Oh,
believing in what you were doing.
absolutely, because, I had to write my own business plan, and I did have
Yeah,
a business advisor at, the Business Gateway, and, she made some minor tweaks to my business plan and asked me a few extra questions around things I had to fill in. But yeah, I suppose I say I was on my own, and in many ways I was, but then I did have that support there, which I do encourage people to go out and seek, if they're starting out, because there is a lot of support there, not just for startups, but for the creative industries as well. And particularly with organisations like the Prince's Trust, it works a little bit differently in Scotland to what it does in England. I think maybe they've come a bit closer together now. But certainly at the time, they were running a mentoring program. You could also attend workshops to learn about kind of tax, doing your
yeah,
tax return,
yeah.
that kind of thing. So there was, yeah, there was a lot of support there. And I remember even getting invited to chat at an event for school kids, just to chat about, starting out. Well, starting up your own business, and I think just giving them advice on the different routes that you could take with your careers, because I think when I was at school there was a lot of pressure, to fill in those UCAS forms
Yeah,
and
definitely.
go to uni, and it was kind of like if you were outside of that sphere and you didn't want to go to university, which was the case for maybe some of my friends, they didn't necessarily get the same support going out into the workplace. They didn't get the same attention, and that was apparent to me. And one of these things, I suppose, that added to the disenchantment I was feeling about the whole education system, because there's not just one path, one route, and I think it's really important to kind of embrace what else is out there, because there are opportunities if you
Yeah.
look.
I think that's very true. And I actually, from my own experience of teaching in schools, I think there's still those things are still the case, that there's pressure on 17, 18-year-olds to do the UCAS forms to apply to university. And whilst that works for many people, that isn't the only option. And I think this is a really good reminder of that, and you
Yeah.
will have been an inspiration to some of those young people that you'll have gone and spoken to, because you'll have given them the kind of well, the belief that there is a different way out there, because some of those people in that room might have been sitting there thinking, well, I don't want to go to university, this doesn't feel right for me for whatever reason, but I've
Yeah.
got an idea, or I might like to try something else. And seeing somebody who probably wasn't that much older than them, actually, which is often another really helpful thing, I think, is seeing somebody
Yeah.
who's gone out and done it. So I can see that that would have definitely built the confidence. And the other thing that struck me in what you said was the hidden transferable skills. Like, you probably would never have imagined that having done some typesetting in German would have then led into quite a specific role that you were given in that agency.
Yeah. Yeah, and it led to other opportunities as well. It was just such a
Yeah.
great that was like my in, and it was, yeah, quite unexpected. And, all the frustration I used to feel typesetting in a different language, but
Yeah.
it's interesting, like, even if you don't know the language, you become quite proficient in doing it. So yeah, it worked out quite well, and, yeah, led to other opportunities there. I think I stayed with them for about a year or so, and then I actually relocated from Edinburgh to be with my partner in York. So I left that studio, and then I was kind of full time in my own business.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think transferable skills kind of fascinate me in a way that we could often never predict which ones are going to be the most useful further down the line,
Yeah,
I think, which is,
no,
yeah,
absolutely.
fascinating. Um, and in this process, were your family and friends supportive of you kind of taking that leap and launching your own business?
Initially, not so much.
Okay.
My brother is a mortgage advisor, um, and at the time was doing kind of like general financial advice as well. He wasn't specialising in mortgages, so I remember kind of him being a little bit concerned about my decision. And I think because I was leaving a well-paid job, and there was good prospects, there was a pension, I got bonuses. But I think for me, and I know we touched on this earlier, uh, I wanted and I needed to enjoy my work. I felt this really deep kind of urge to do something that was rewarding for me and that didn't just pay the bills. And it meant, I suppose, embracing an element of risk because, I was going into something that was unknown for me, that, I wasn't certain that I would get paid on time or at all by
Yeah.
people or even be able to earn enough to pay my bills. So, there was a lot of challenges in those early days. But I don't know, I often do things based on a feeling, and kind of my gut told me, that it was time to try something new. And I had been trying to sort of like find a way out of that environment I was in for a little while, a year or so. And, it really was the right time for me. I think I would have just become quite creatively stagnated if I hadn't left. There's only so much you can do in a particular job. I was working for one brand, and I wanted to have a kind of variety of clients and opportunities.
Yeah. What happened next? Because I know that your career since then has taken a number of kind of twists and turns. So maybe talk to us about the journey that you've been on since launching that business, and where the business has gone since.
Mhm. First studio was called Creative State, and I ran that business for 4 years before my partner came on board. So my partner Jonathan, he joined me in 2009. So he was supporting me with video production for some clients. The majority of work I was doing was website design and development, a bit of graphic design. So it was nice to have a kind of helping hand there, and he started to build up his skill set in that area as well. Um, and then a few years after he joined, we had the opportunity to merge with another studio. Um, and that is what made us move from Yorkshire back to Scotland. So
Okay.
we moved up there, and yeah, merged with another small studio, similar size to ours. And yeah, it was a really kind of interesting way of growing because we'd been looking at opportunities for a while. Do we hire staff and then try and find the work to sustain everybody? Or do we find the work and then quickly hire people? So we were caught in a bit of a tricky situation where we couldn't really grow beyond the two of us, and we were doing a bit of outsourcing. But the decision was kind of made for us because somebody reached out to me on Twitter, of all
Right.
places, and said, I've been following your studio for a while. We started around about the same time. I'm ready to kind of like leave the industry. Would you be interested in having a coffee and seeing about kind of taking on the opportunity to buy my business? So, um, I mean, it was yeah. Again, it's that sort of gut feeling of yep, that's the right move for us. So we went for a coffee when I was in Edinburgh for meetings, and we made an offer for that business, and then brought it together with Creative State, and then we then took that studio's name on because it just didn't make sense to kind of run them both side by side when they were doing a similar thing. And so that business was called If Looks Could Kill,
Okay.
and that business still exists today, and, Jonathan runs that now, because a few years ago, I decided to pivot again, and that was really in the direction of branding because for a long time I had been working on website design and development projects, primarily doing design and management, but it was, I suppose, becoming a little bit repetitive. And as much as I found the work kind of challenging and rewarding, it wasn't really sort of feeding me in the way that branding and design projects do, particularly in print form or packaging. And I was also just feeling like I really wanted to work with small businesses, um, because I'd had experience of working with, obviously a large organization early on in my career, then small business clients, and then larger organizations again. And I think I just sort of felt like, I'd had the experience of both, and mainly enjoyed the kind of connection I had with other small business owners. I think because we had kind of shared experiences. And yeah, so it made sense really for me to focus and find what felt good. Um, and so yeah, 3 years ago, I floated the idea past Jonathan that it might be worth me kind of like sidestepping If Looks Could Kill, letting him run the website design and development business, and then I would set up a new studio and focus primarily on branding. So yeah, the rest is history.
How has that worked out for you? Do you feel confident, I'm sure you do, that that was the right decision and you're enjoying what you're doing?
Yes, yeah, it feels like it's been the right decision. I think for me, it was such a huge kind of creative leap because, I was leaving the sort of safety of a business that we had grown and then, merged with the other wee studio, and then, got to a place where we felt quite confident and happy with it. And while that studio had gone through some shifts and changes, we had retained, a number of clients, and it just felt like a really sort of safe space to be, particularly because, it got us through the 2008 financial crisis. We still ran it through the pandemic. It's been a good business, and, it's looked after us and our family. But I suppose it comes back to that kind of creative need again, the want to kind of satisfy those kind of um, urges to do something
Yeah.
that feels more aligned. And I think I'd been feeling quite kind of disconnected for a while, from what I was doing in that business. And so to try something new almost felt like an opportunity for me to kind of reinvent myself a little
Yeah,
bit. And
definitely.
yeah, it felt exciting. Um, yeah, it just yeah, it felt right in a lot of ways, and opportunities came to me quite quickly after setting it up as well, which was a little unexpected, but I think it had a lot to do with that feeling of alignment and the way that I'd branded the studio and how I was communicating with people and connecting with them. And it was almost like all the years and all the strands of experience kind of coming
Mm.
together in a package that felt more me.
Yeah. I think it's really inspiring to hear that you have kind of allowed yourself to follow that path and just made it work. And you've really done that a couple of times in your career. Um, and I think it is really inspiring to hear that because you've really carefully thought about those decisions along the way. You've not just kind of jumped into something and then figured it out as you go along. You've thought about it carefully, but equally you haven't been held back by worrying too much about what might go wrong. And for me, hearing that, I find that to be really inspiring. And I think you're right in what you say that there's probably no surprise that the work came to you quite quickly because I think when you believe in something and you it means so much to you, you exude all of that, don't you, to the other people around you. I think it just happens naturally.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of that, in that in I suppose that intentionality, if you're
Mm,
really, careful about the decisions you make. Although what I will say is that, while I do make a lot of decisions on my gut, I still think there's an element of wanting to make sure there's, a safety net there.
yeah, of course. Yeah.
I suppose this leap felt a little bit safer than when I went self-employed, all those years ago. I mean, that was nearly 20 years ago now. Um, and yeah, I think for me, that that I had, I suppose, a confidence that I maybe hadn't exuded when I first started my business and I had to do all the kind of grafting to find the work. I think I've learned over the years that, things do work out. Um, and I don't mean that in the sense that, I just trust that everything's going to
No.
go okay and go my way because there's been some definite challenges. But I've certainly learned that if I follow a feeling, trust my intuition, that things will generally work out. And so I suppose that's the trust that's there. And I think because I've got that trust in myself, perhaps that's something that speaks to potential clients because that is something I want to give to them. I talk about feeling at home in your business, and for me, I feel very much at home in what I do. Um, and it's something I want to give to other small businesses as well, or people that are maybe a little bit scared to make that leap to do the things that they want to do and to express themselves as well. Because I think a lot of the time, my clients might be people who have just got such amazing potential and there are opportunities there, but they're not quite grasping them. And so it's about helping them to see those possibilities, whether that's through the creative mentoring that I offer, but also in terms of branding their businesses and giving them that confidence in the visual appearance of things. Because I think sometimes that holds people back. They're a little bit scared to show up because of how something looks and it doesn't feel resonant with them. So it's all about kind of like helping them create that whole brand package and experience.
And that
Yeah,
makes complete
which I
sense.
enjoy.
And I think those things are so intrinsically linked, aren't they? You can't just have, well, it's probably hard to have great branding without delving into what that person's business or um, brand actually is and what it means to them. The two things seem very interconnected, but I'm not sure that everybody realizes that. So it's good that you're bringing that together, I think, and yeah, helping people to see those things for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, my final question for you is, what advice do you have for anyone who's listening and thinking about starting their own business?
So part of me does want to be quite bold and suggest that, you just do it. I think I've kind of learned from past experiences, that maybe, it's worth having some kind of cushion in place,
Yeah.
or some kind of support, whether that's through an organization, as we've talked about, or family and friends. Although, of course, some people might have the financial means to do it, but I do think it can really drain a lot of energy if you're worrying about money while trying to,
Yes.
run a new business. And sometimes people are lucky enough to land on their feet and it works out from the off. But I've seen a lot of businesses kind of thrive, and I've also seen a lot of businesses fold. And it is often because, they've not had the kind of like foresight, to put something in place to kind of hold them while they're finding their feet, because there's so much to learn in business. But, you know, uh, I suppose ultimately, follow your heart. And, as I said earlier about the sort of feelings I had when I started These Are the Days a few years ago, is don't be afraid to kind of reinvent yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's brilliant advice. Sarah, thank you so much for giving up your time to talk to me today. And it's so nice to finally get to meet you virtually.
Yes, yeah, it's lovely. I love the opportunity to kind of like see someone face to face, albeit digitally. But,
Yes,
hey, maybe we'll make a real life meetup happen at some point.
I hope so very much. Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
That was Sarah Robertson talking to Hannah Ash on the Chez Hanny podcast. If you enjoyed listening to that interview, then you might be keen to check out the previous 12 episodes, which are available on my Substack page. Go to shayhanny.substack.com, where you'll find the previous episodes ready and waiting for you to listen. And if you're looking forward to a bit more, then watch this space for the next season coming soon. I'm going to be interviewing women who consider themselves to be multi hyphenates in the way that they work. That means they don't just have one job, but they make their living from a whole range of different methods, something that I'm increasingly exploring in my own life and work and enjoying very much. So I'm keen to learn from others and to find out how they approach their working lives. I've got some excellent guests lined up, and I can't wait to share those episodes with you soon. This is Hannah signing off for now, but please make sure that you watch out for your inboxes, where if you're subscribed to Chez Hanny on Substack, you will be the first to know when the new episodes of the new series land. See you then, and take care.